Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Clutch Scoops, a Wednesday afternoon edition. Trade deadline is now 23 and a half hours away. Brett, you doing all right over there?
I'm doing well, Tomer. We got plenty to talk about on this show, from Giannis to smaller trades to trades that were made today. The Anthony Davis one, setting everybody off. But before we get started, I know people are looking at my shirt. They see the Nets logo. This is not a Brooklyn Nets shirt. We got the Bulls, we got the Sixers, we got the Jazz, we got the Warriors. Everybody else is on the back. So before everybody starts freaking out, all 30 teams are represented.
This is no bias Brett in the building. We got all 30 teams on the shirt. No bias Brett in the building. Yeah, so like I said, we have less than 24 hours of the trade deadline, and it seems like everything is either happening at once or not happening at all. It seems like yesterday we had a couple trades happen just before the show or on the show. Then the James Harden Darius Garland trade happened later that night. Today, nothing really happened until about, I want to say, 10 or so a.m. Pacific time. Then we had Anthony Davis, Jared McCain, Coby White just came out shortly. So let's start with the Anthony Davis trade. Obviously, a big name there. Brett, we were hearing some rumblings that the Mavs were maybe just going to keep and hold on to Anthony Davis through the trade deadline, and a guy who's going to be out for the foreseeable future with a wrist injury. Um, Shockingly, the Washington Wizards decided, hey, this is the guy we want, and we're going for it. What can you tell us about the AD trade to the Washington Wizards?
Well, it's something that I didn't know about. I'll admit that I did not know that the Wizards were interested in Anthony Davis, and I'm sure a lot of other people around the league did not know that until Shams broke that news. But it makes a lot of sense that the Mavericks just want to get rid of him now, open up cap space, because what we've been reporting here at Clutch Points over the last few weeks is that the Mavericks have been wanting to open up cap space so they can build around Cooper Flag for their foreseeable future. They do not want to be tied down by these long-term contracts. And even though there was some pushback from owner Patrick Dumont about trading Anthony Davis, right now is the only time that they can get any sort of value for him, especially the type of value that they got from the Wizards, where they get these expiring salaries and they're able to get some sort of draft compensation. Even though the picks are not that great, I believe one of them this year is the Thunder's pick in the first round, so that's the final pick of the first round. And then the other one is a 2030 Warriors pick that will only go to the Mavericks if it's, I think, 21 to 30. So again, you're kind of betting on the Warriors to be bad then if you're the Mavericks. Obviously, if they get Giannis, if they make another move this offseason to get a different big star, Joe Lacob is always looking to put his team in a position to be successful. So even in the post Steph Curry era, that's going to be the goal. So that pick right now looks like that's probably going to be somewhere in that 20 to 30 range. And so what would the Mavericks get for that? Probably just a second round pick. But they're able to salvage some type of value for Anthony Davis. And if he's healthy, I know it's a huge if, Tomer, and we've talked about it before. This guy just can't stay healthy. But if he's on the court, you got him, Alex Sarr, a really good front court duo there. Trey Young, Kaishan George, Bilal Coulibaly still there, Trey Johnson, a young shooter. So much like how we talked about yesterday with the Utah Jazz kind of taking a swing with their young talents in their cap space, we're now seeing a very similar philosophy here by the Wizards, who still have a lot of draft picks to utilize either via the draft or they could potentially flip those assets down the road for more players.
And so, I think this is a Wizards franchise that a couple of years ago was dealing with having Bradley Beal, having Kyle Kuzma, no real avenue to, get young talent outside of trading those guys. The picks, the full trade was Anthony Davis, Jaden Hardy, D'Angelo Russell, and Dante Exum to the Washington Wizards. For Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, Malachi Branham, Marvin Bagley III, a 2026 Thunder first round pick, the 2030 protected Warriors first round pick, which I believe came from the Jordan Poole trade. So that was protected, what, 21 to 30?
21 to 30, it was part of that Chris Paul Jordan Poole swap.
Okay, so protect 21 to 30, along with a second round pick in 2026 from the Suns, 27 from the Bulls, and 29 from the Houston Rockets. So, I mean, look, the Mavs monumentally messed up with the Luka Doncic trade, and I think they've clearly moved off that regime, that general manager, and are trying to again build around Cooper Flag, build around Kyrie Irving until maybe they feel like they need to move off him, but for now they're trying to build around Cooper Flag, and so this trade again. Washington has just came out of nowhere, and now they feel like they have a team that could contend in the Eastern Conference. Maybe not this season because AD is obviously injured. Trae Young has not played yet, but they'll have their lottery pick this summer. And then they will enter next season with Trey Young, Anthony Davis, Alex Sarr. We know AD doesn't want to play the five, and so Alex Sarr can clearly do that. You have Trey Johnson, who's played well in the last several weeks. Kaishawn George, obviously a really good player, emerging there in Washington. So you can see kind of the steps towards building a championship team, or at least a playoff contending team. Put the right vets around those young guys and help them kind of learn and build towards winning. Um, do you see this team kind of making a playoff push? Are there any other moves that the Wizards can kind of make here to continue making that push next season?
Next season for sure, and it obviously depends on the health of Trey Young. He's got to get healthy. AD, he's got to get healthy. But I love this trade because Anthony Davis, when he is healthy, he's a top 15 player, maybe even top 10 player in this league. And so you give up draft assets that you are not going to utilize whatsoever. And so now you basically flip those for a top 75 player of all time. He was on the greatest player all time list, that 75 anniversary team. So maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe he gets injured again and he's just not healthy, and that's the risk you take if you're the Wizards. But it's really not a risk because these guys that you had, Middleton, Malachi Branham, and then there was another expiring contract in there too, Marvin Bagley. You weren't going to retain those guys in the summer. So they were just going to walk. Now you get to look at Anthony Davis for like a year and a half, and maybe it works out. So I love this trade for the Wizards. I love it for the Mavericks to get off of Anthony Davis's contract and get some type of value. So I think that it was a good, surprising trade made today.
Another move. Do you want to discuss Coby White now, or should we push it down to later? What do you want to do?
Yeah, we can talk Coby White. Let's talk this Coby White trade.
All right, yeah, Coby White, a player who I think was heavily involved in trade talks over the last, um, couple weeks. Uh, let's just go over this trade details here. I don't want to misspeak on anything. Coby White was traded to the Charlotte Hornets, in a combination. Where's the tweet? There we go. Coby White traded to the Charlotte Hornets with Mike Conley from the Chicago Bulls for Colin Sexton, Ousmane Dieng, and 3 second-round picks. So the Bulls were not able to get that first-round pick they were looking for. Coby White, they'd been telling teams they've wanted the first-round pick. They were not able to get that first-round pick. But they were able to get 3 second-round picks. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ousmane Dieng was traded to the Charlotte Hornets as part of the Jared McCain trade. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way this works is the Oklahoma City first have to trade Ousmane Dieng to the Charlotte Hornets for Mason Plumlee, and then they're going to immediately waive Mason Plumlee to open up that roster spot. So Dieng goes to the Hornets with a second round pick. Mason Plumlee goes back to the Thunder, who is subsequently waived. And then that 3-team deal, however this is going to be finished, I don't know if it's going to be a 3-team deal, just a bunch of 2-team deals or what. But then the next trade can happen where Colin Sexton is on the move from the Charlotte Hornets to the Bulls, and then you have Mike Conley going to the Hornets. You have Coby White going to the Hornets. And then the Thunder can go back to their Jared McCain trade and finalize that one because you can't go over the roster maximum of 15. And so with the Thunder, since they're already at 15, you can't trade for 2 guys and only dump Dieng. It has to be transactional where you dump Mason Plumlee, and then you have the open roster spot, and you can fill that in with Jared McCain.
So I do want to point out that the Coby White is an expiring contract. Brett, you want to take over for a second? I got to take a call.
Let's do it. So we're talking the Coby White trade here. I think that it's a good move for the Bulls, not only because they have all these guards, but also because they get some second round assets out of it, and they're able to get Colin Sexton, who's a player that the Bulls have liked for several years now. And Coby White never seemed like that his future was going to be in Chicago once they extended Josh Giddey. And now with all their guards, with all the guard depth that they have, Anthony Simon, they just traded for Jaden Ivey, who they're going to look to give a contract to in restricted free agency. Coby White goes to a fresh start with a young and upcoming Charlotte Hornets team. I like the move a lot. Ousmane Dieng, maybe he turns out to be something for the Bulls, but most likely just an expiring contract there. So just a little small move. And then we look at the Thunder. We had heard recently that the Thunder were in the market to get a guard. We had even heard Coby White was an option for the Thunder as a potential 2-3 month rental for the rest of this season. Obviously, that would have been a steep price to pay at $12 million. You would have been talking about somebody more than Ousmane Dieng. But you look at Jared McCain, he's on a rookie deal. You can give up a draft pick that you're not really going to utilize in the first round if you're the Thunder, given all the assets that you have moving forward. And so Jared McCain can come in and contribute immediately, especially now that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be out for several weeks with that abdominal strain.
Great. We covered Jared McCain. We covered Coby White and Anthony Davis. Appreciate you
Real
filling in there,
quick,
Brett.
real quick, some live rumors that are coming in here that we just reported. Well, actually, it looks like that there's now a trade. We can talk about it from your angle, Tomera, of Chris Paul being traded to the Toronto Raptors. If you want to take over there.
I actually just saw this right now. The Clippers, Brooklyn Nets, and Toronto Raptors have agreed on a multi-team trade to send Chris Paul to the Raptors and Ochai Agbaji, a 2032 second round pick, Raptors second rounder, and cash to the Nets. So, yeah, I think when you talk about Chris Paul and trading him, the Clippers were always disinterested in taking on any kind of salary back for him. It was more just going to be a roster spot opening and financial flexibility. So I know they were very disinterested in taking anything back for him. So the Clippers, I believe, freed up 300,000, or sorry, they took on $300,000 additionally from the Darius Garland trade. So they're now, I think, 800,000 away from the first apron. And now this trade frees up a few million there, which they'll stay active. I think try to move a couple more guys, but we'll use that money to be able to sign Kobe Sanders and Jordan Miller to standard deals. We'll find out more about the
I do
the
want to touch on this real
details of
quick
this.
from a Toronto Raptors angle, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later with Domantas Sabonis. But obviously, Ochai Agbaji was a player involved in those Sabonis trade talks with the Kings that have been going nowhere. They've been looking for a third team to take on Jakob Poeltl's contract. That has not happened to this point. So it could be very telling, this trade, that all the Raptors are doing is ducking the tax line, getting Chris Paul, whether he stays there, whether he's bought out, probably stays there at this point. And so that's that with the Raptors. It doesn't seem like that there's any traction on the Domantas Sabonis trade talks right now. But again, some live rumors coming in before we were cut off by this Chris Paul trade. We just reported on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Cam Thomas is a player that the Brooklyn Nets are actively looking to trade, with the Milwaukee Bucks appearing to be a real suitor for him. And he's going to be an unrestricted free agent this upcoming offseason after he did not agree to a deal with the Brooklyn Nets as a restricted free agent. He opted in to his qualifying offer, so he does have a no trade clause. He has pull and say in where he goes. And it's worth noting that he has the same agent as Giannis Antetokounmpo. So the Milwaukee Bucks, certainly a potential destination for the hot scorer off the bench, Cam Thomas. The Cleveland Cavaliers, another team that we have heard is interested in Cam Thomas because they are looking to get off Alonzo Ball's contract. They have been talking with the Brooklyn Nets about possibly doing so. And I do want to give a shout out to our buddy Mike Scotto over at Hoopshype as well. He was the first to report in the Cavaliers' interest in Cam Thomas, and a few days ago he had also reported on the whole D'Angelo Russell Cam Thomas stuff as well.
But I do want to add, just wanted to add, we're one sec. Just informed that I think you reported earlier today that the Sacramento Kings were interested in acquiring or trading for Ja Morant. I've been told that the Ja Morant is not interested in going to Sacramento Kings. If he goes anywhere, he's looking at the Miami Heat or the Minnesota Timberwolves. Those would be his two preferred destinations. And I think two teams that would interest him, allow him to pair up with another star in either Anthony Edwards or Bam Adebayo. And both teams are said to be open to the idea of extending him beyond his current contract. The Miami Heat, as we reported earlier today, would be open to signing him to that 3-year deal extension worth $178 million. That, I believe, is the max he can get. So the Sacramento Kings interested in Ja Morant. Ja Morant's camp is not interested in that franchise and being traded there. They are eyeing the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Miami Heat in a trade sometime over the next 24 hours. But again, the Memphis Grizzlies do hold all the cards here. They can trade him to wherever they feel is the best trade package. I will say, I'm curious to see if a team trades for Morant, knowing that he's not going to be there long term or not interested in staying there long term. Um, I would highly doubt that. I think he has 2 years left on his deal after this season, which is when he becomes extension eligible. So I'm not sure if a team is willing to take a chance on Ja Morant. I know that I can report with certainty that the Miami Heat have looked into and done their homework on Ja Morant and, are confident in their ability to get him playing their style of basketball. If they were to trade for him, and I think they've shifted their focus a little bit over to Ja Morant since your report that they're probably out of the Miami Heat, out of the Giannis Antetokounmpo hunt right now. Maybe you can add more on the Giannis front right there.
So we'll move right into the Giannis intel here. Giannis Antetokounmpo, that's the big domino that everybody's waiting to get information on. Who has a chance to get him? We know that the Knicks have been at the forefront of those discussions since the offseason. They've been a team that has checked in with Milwaukee this trade cycle. The Warriors, the Heat, the Minnesota Timberwolves are all teams that have been talked about as prime suitors for Giannis Antetokounmpo. And late last night, we reported here at Clutch Points that Giannis Antetokounmpo has strong interest in playing next to Anthony Edwards and for the Minnesota Timberwolves. That is his prime destination. If he is traded before this trade deadline, he would like to end up in Minnesota. And obviously, there's a lot of roadblocks there because the Timberwolves do not have draft picks. They have Jaden McDaniels, which is a player the Bucks would absolutely love to get in a trade for Giannis. And so can you trade Julius Randle, maybe Naz Reid, some other assets to potentially get the Bucks what they want in a trade for Giannis? As of right now, with less than 24 hours until the trade deadline, the Minnesota Timberwolves are continuing to work the phones to see if there is an angle for them to get the assets that the Bucks want. But there's two things here. One, the Bucks have still yet to signal that they would in fact trade Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the second thing is team executives around the league and team sources just doubt the fact that Giannis is actually going to be on the move before the trade deadline. So that's mainly the big update. The Warriors package is still there. Minnesota's looking to try to do things. We've also been told, and you could read it on Clutch Points in our intel story today, that the Miami Heat are focusing on other avenues at this point. They've been told from the Bucks angle that they are not in the sweepstakes before this trade deadline for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I have heard that the Bucks do not have interest in taking back Tyler Hero simply because they do not have interest in extending him. He will be entering the final year of his contract next season, and obviously there's going to be big talks about what kind of money he can get on a new contract. So the Bucks are still talking with the Timberwolves. That seems to be the only angle at this point. The Warriors package is there, barring a last-minute change. I don't see that happening. And so the Miami Heat out on Giannis potentially could get Ja Morant, as Tomer just alluded to, and we'll talk about Ja Morant in a little bit. But all indications right now are that Giannis will remain with the Bucks past the trade deadline, and then they're going to try to revisit conversations in the offseason and also try to persuade him to stay with the franchise that he's been with his entire career.
So the Wolves here are clearly making a last minute type of push before the deadline for Giannis. There's still a chance they get it done, albeit it doesn't seem likely at this stage.
Real quick, they don't want this to go past the deadline. The Timberwolves want a deal done now because they know if this extends to the offseason, the chances of them getting Giannis are very, very slim, especially with teams like the Knicks having more assets to trade for Giannis.
So that leads me to my next question: Is do the Wolves have a chance here to facilitate everything that needs to happen? Do they have enough time to make a Jaden McDaniels trade happen, or do they need to offload a Julius Randle to make? Do they have enough time in the next 23 hours here to get enough to get a deal done for Giannis?
Well, I've heard that there are several teams that are interested in Jaden McDaniels, but the problem is the Bucks would want him coming back in a trade for Giannis. So now you're looking at Julius Randle. Can you get 2 first-round picks for him? Naz Reid, who's a player the Timberwolves absolutely don't want to get rid of, but if that's the avenue that they're forced to do to get Giannis, I'm sure that they would be receptive to it. Could they get multiple first-round picks for him with his long-term contract? So a lot of question marks here. A lot of moving pieces would have to be done. And quite honestly, Tomer, I don't see this being done in the next 23, 22 hours. But we've seen crazier things before. And one thing, it kept me up late at night. I was talking with our good friend Yosi Goslin, a capologist, if you will, if that's what we like to call them in the NBA. He does great work for his platform, The Third Apron, and obviously capsheets.com. Check out his work for sure. I was talking with him. It was like 3:30 in the morning, and we were talking till like 4 about could the Cavaliers potentially get involved for Giannis? And it makes you think a little bit because the Cavs just traded for James Harden. They got rid of Darius Garland. And why would they do that? Well, they're going all in to push for a championship right now. They're still looking to make moves. They're looking to dump Lonzo Ball's salary. We've heard that they've talked with teams about Jared Allen and also Max Strus. I don't think either player is going to be on the move before this trade deadline, but they're still looking to cut salary, especially heading into the offseason. But what if they offered Evan Mobley their 2031 first round pick and then a 2032 first round swap? That package right there is probably better than anything else you could find on the market because Evan Mobley would fetch you at least 3, maybe even 4 first round picks on the market right now. He's that young blue chip type of talent that Shams has been saying that the Milwaukee Bucks want. And so it's something interesting to kind of discuss. I don't think that's going to happen right now before the trade deadline. But if there was one team to come in late with a package and really go after Giannis Antetokounmpo, it would have to be the Cleveland Cavaliers in my mind.
So obviously, the Cavs have a runway here because they do have a younger Donovan Mitchell and even younger Evan Mobley. They traded 26-year-old Darius Garland, so clearly, they're going in now. Trading for Evan Mobley and trying to acquire Giannis, we all know all about the rumors about LeBron potentially going there next year as part of his retirement tour one last season. I mean, this is the most win now move. I mean, the most win now move happened yesterday with trading for James Harden. But if they really went in on Giannis, I mean, you're giving yourself a very legitimate 2 to 3 year window to go all in and kind of say screw the future. We need to do it now. Is that correct?
And that's the mindset. That's what me and Yosi were talking about is if you're going to trade for James Harden, this isn't going to be a long-term thing. He's not going to be there for the next 4 or 5 years. And so you put yourself in a window, especially with Donovan Mitchell's contract and the talks of extensions with him. And there's people out there saying that that may not happen, that he's seriously considering his future in the league once that time comes. So if you're the Cavs, you want to, one, lock in Mitchell long-term, and two, prove to him that you're a championship contender. You go out and trade Darius Garland for James Harden, step one. And then if you're able to flip Evan Mobley into Giannis and trade some of your other assets to fill the gaps around him, that finally puts you in the championship picture because a three-headed monster of Donovan Mitchell, Giannis, and James Harden, assuming they're all healthy in the East playoffs, I don't think that even the New York Knicks or a team like the Pistons or Celtics can keep up with that.
Very interesting. Teams clearly, some teams really want to get this Giannis deal done now. The Wolves, the Warriors, other teams around the league, as you've reported, kind of pressuring and trying to get the Bucks to hold off to the offseason, give us a chance to get a couple more draft assets, make some more things available so we can, try to go after Giannis. I'm very curious. I mean, Giannis has had a couple of interviews, if I'm not mistaken, with some local Bucks media. I think there was a local paper, and then The Athletic even got an interview with him where he was saying he doesn't necessarily want a trade. He would like to retire with the Milwaukee Bucks. But he also wants a chance to win, the best chance to win. Like I think one of the quotes he had to The Athletic was, "You've been around a championship team. You've seen what it looks like in 2021. Can we build that here? We need to be, I'm not trying to play for the playoffs. I'm trying to play for a championship." And so, it remains to be seen. Maybe there's an opportunity here for the Bucks to land, a lottery pick this summer, and maybe that's enough. They land one of those big fish in the draft. Is that enough to convince Giannis to give it another go? Can they pull off another move in the offseason to acquire more talent? Maybe Miles Turner's on the move and they can find someone else, maybe someone younger that can entice Giannis to stay. I think everything, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, kind of is still on the table here with Giannis and the Bucks.
Certainly, and it's because more assets open up for the Bucks too in the offseason, where right now they only have their 2031 first round pick that can be traded. Once the offseason begins and the new league year begins, they'll open up their 2033 pick. So you have two first round picks that you can now use to try to improve your roster. Kyle Kuzma will be in the final year of his contract, and his salary decreases, so it'll be much easier to potentially move him. Bobby Portis will only have 2 years left on his contract. You got some of these young emerging guys, Kevin Porter, Ryan Rollins, and so there are pieces there for Milwaukee. If they were to keep Giannis and convince him, especially with that draft pick coming in, maybe you can start to build something here. But again, Tomer, it's going to go into the offseason. Teams are going to be there inquiring about him. And I think that it's going to slow down the trade deadline tomorrow. I think that the action that we're seeing yesterday and the action that we're seeing today is basically like recent years where everything happens at the deadline. We're getting those deadline deals ahead of time because some of these teams like the Warriors, like the Heat, the Knicks, and the Timberwolves that want Giannis, and some of these other teams like the Lakers and Cavs that could certainly pursue him in the offseason, they're holding on to their assets for that reason. And so that's why we're seeing all these trades come out now. That's why Giannis, very, very likely, 99, 98% sure at this point, that he's going to be staying with the Bucks. It would take something significant right ahead of the deadline for the Bucks to move him.
A couple quick notes on the recent Clippers, Nets, and Raptors trade. The Raptors are able to get out of the tax by trading Ochai Agbaji. Obviously Chris Paul gets the Clippers another roster spot and enough money to give two standard contracts to Jordan Miller and Kobe Sanders. Um, Shams reporting that the Raptors will not require Chris Paul to report to the team and could still discuss trades involving him over the next day to send him to maybe a destination where he can play. Chris has preferred to stay somewhere on the West Coast, somewhere where he can be close to his family. Come to his son's games and be around his family. But obviously, um, a little bit of a tougher ask now, right now, with not a lot of teams really able to make moves. Everyone waiting on Giannis, so we'll see what happens there. But that does transition us to our next segment: Clippers and Cavs. Facilitated the trade yesterday, official. James Harden traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for Darius Garland and a 2026 second round pick, I believe. Correct, Brett?
Yes, yeah, that sounds right.
So that deal obviously gets a 36-year-old All Star to the Cleveland Cavaliers, gives them a chance, they feel like, to contend immediately. This kind of player, this kind of not only playmaker but scorer, but a guy who
I think Tomer froze, so I'm going to take over here talking about the Clippers and the Cavs trade, and we'll let Tomer to kind of reset things real quick. Okay, so the Cavs and James Harden. It's a very interesting fit, like we talked about earlier in this show, and they wanted to go out and move Darius Garland because of concerns surrounding his health. That has been a big issue to this point. And so Darius Garland going to the Clippers, it was just the Cavs basically. His availability was not there over the last 2 years or so. Tomer, I'm glad that you're back so we can talk about this trade. But Darius Garland's
yeah.
health with the Cavaliers and his availability, one of the big reasons why they went out and got James Harden at this point.
Yeah, so I don't know where exactly I cut off, but I think from the Cleveland perspective, they obviously wanted a guy to get Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley more involved. And then on the Clipper side, again, like we mentioned yesterday, they just did not have very many avenues to improve and get younger. And I think the Clippers, took a chance on a 26-year-old All Star, multiple time All Star. We know he has foot issues, and I think the Clippers are obviously very wary of that. But again, not many avenues to improve. I think they remain competitive with this trade, but also allows them to kind of transition to the next era of basketball. We know that they have not wanted to go past 2027 as far as having contracts and salary on their books. They've refused to do it for Paul George. They refused to do it for Norman Powell, and they refused to do it for James Harden. And so, you see that. I think this was obviously a much more collaborative effort, I will say, between Harden and the Clippers. There was no bad blood. There's no animosity here. Both sides kind of understood where things stood, especially with the Clippers getting off to kind of a rough start to the season. Even though they did play better of late, they weren't exactly in that playoff hunt like the Cleveland Cavaliers are in the Eastern Conference. And so this gives James a chance to contend for a championship alongside a budding star in Donovan Mitchell, also an Adidas athlete. So those two Adidas stars are together. And yeah, meanwhile, the Clippers are just able to kind of stay competitive, but also get a 26-year-old All Star. So I do wonder, though, what this means for the rest of the Clippers season, though, because it's not like they're going to just be falling out of the playoff race. Or play-in race. They'll still be competitive for that. But when is Darius Garland going to be back? We know that the Boston Celtics acquired strongly and heavily about Ivica Zubac, but it doesn't sound like they're going to trade him. But what does his future look like? Is there a team out there that could make a last-minute swing with some assets for Kawhi Leonard? Again, none of these seem likely, but after the trade for James Harden, which kind of came out of left field, it seems like anything should be on the table.
That's kind of where I'm at too with the Clippers. Is you move Chris Paul, so now you have those open roster spots to sign Jordan Miller. You could sign Kobe Sanders, as you've been reporting, Tomer, for weeks. That is the goal of the Clippers. And so now you have Darius Garland, you have Kawhi Leonard still, John Collins on expiring contract. They'll probably look to keep him on some kind of short-term deal, I would assume, given his importance to this team. But we'll see what happens in the offseason. But the Clippers right now, that they're kind of just riding the waves, and they're going to see how good this team can be the rest of the year. If they make the playoffs, great. If they don't, I think that the writing has been on the wall since the start of the season for that. And now we kind of transition to the Cavs part of it. They're still looking to make moves. We mentioned Cam Thomas earlier. They're looking to get out of the second apron, and they're going to continue to make moves, especially so they can convert Naquan Tomlin, who's on a two-way contract, to a standard deal. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this James Harden Clippers angle, Tomer. But other than that, it seems like that these two teams kind of trending in different directions, whereas the Clippers are taking a step back, trying to get younger and develop some of those younger guys like we mentioned. The Cavaliers, they're going all in and going for a championship right now.
Yeah, very interested to see what other moves Cleveland has in store here. I think the Clippers do have another move or two kind of in store to try to get further below the first apron. Get out of the tax. Maybe look at guys like Bogdan Bogdanovic if someone will take him. He has a team option for next season, so technically can be expiring. Kobe Brown also expiring. They declined his fourth year option, so we'll see what ends up happening there. Let's move on though to the Chicago Bulls, a team that recently did make a move to land or to get out of Coby White, but they still have a plethora of guards there. I mean, they got rid of Mike Conley as well, but there's just a lot going on with Chicago. What is Chicago kind of eyeing right now with Io Dosumu and now acquiring Colin Sexton? Like, what are they looking at right now?
Well, they want to keep Dasumu, even though teams have continued to inquire about him. I haven't heard anything suggesting that they're actively looking to move him. Obviously, they're going to continue to field calls, and if there's a deal that they can't turn down, they would probably think about doing it. But they love Ayo Dosunmu. They want to keep him. Anthony Simons, he's on an expiring contract. We'll see what happens there, whether or not he's flipped. But it seems like that the Bulls are prioritizing cap space to have flexibility, and they're going to continue to focus on some of these young guys on their roster. One name that we have heard on the trade block for the Bulls that we recently wrote about is Yves Missi from the New Orleans Pelicans, a big man that they have been targeting for quite some time. Other teams have as well, but the Bulls have really emerged as a team that is in on Yves Missi. Whether or not the Pelicans move him, they've been looking for a first-round pick. I've heard that teams have offered second-round assets, and the Pelicans have not budged on their asking price, and that has been pretty consistent for all their players to this point. So a team at the bottom of the standings, Tomer, I don't really know what the Pelicans are doing at this point because, yeah, you want to get some type of value for your players, but it seems like that they're asking unrealistic asking prices for guys like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, even Yves Missi to try to get an unprotected first-round pick there when he hasn't really been in the rotation all season. So it's going to be really interesting to see if the Bulls can close the door there. As far as other center talk, we also heard some talk a little bit about the Bulls being interested in Daniel Gafford. That doesn't seem like an avenue that they're going to go anymore. Plenty of other teams have also expressed interest in Gafford, including the Atlanta Hawks, and I think that that's a very interesting angle there. Now that Anthony Davis is out of the fold for the Hawks and that he's on the move to the Washington Wizards, do the Hawks potentially pivot and they go for Daniel Gafford by flipping Kristaps Porzingis' contract? Maybe they get back Klay Thompson, who the Mavericks are also trying to trade away. So there's a potential pathway there for a deal. We'll see what develops in Atlanta over the course of the next 23-ish hours or so.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to report something. I believe another Ivica Zubac, I believe, is expected to miss tonight's game, but I think it is not trade related.
Yeah, they're not trading Zubac at this deadline.
No, no, no. I think he and his wife are expecting, so he's probably not going to be playing tonight's game. I believe. Ivica Zubac, that is against the Cavs. So don't run with the trade talk. It's not that. Yeah, I mean, are we ready to move on to the next topic? I feel like you covered the Bulls. The Bulls angle pretty
Let's
well.
go. We covered the Bulls in that AD segment too, so we're good.
Yeah. Okay. This is one that I know you've been getting 50 billion questions about. The Golden State Warriors. What are they doing, Brett? Please tell me they're doing something, Brett. Where's Mike Dunleavy, Brett? Brett. What are the Warriors doing?
Well, I think that the interesting thing is how do the Warriors manage the trade deadline if they don't make a move? And right now they put all their eggs in one basket to go after Giannis Antetokounmpo. They put all their assets on the table and said to the Bucks, "You can have whatever you want, other than Stephen Curry." The Bucks were not interested in any package surrounding Jimmy Butler, so that's why his reassurance was given that he's not being traded. And so now Draymond Green was put in those trade talks with Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Pajemski, first round assets through 2032, and that has been the Warriors' offer since the very first time that they spoke with the Bucks. That those assets have been there. Whether or not Milwaukee wants to make a trade, it's been up to them. Doesn't seem like that they will accept that package. So now what happens before the deadline, Tomer? Do they pivot to someone else that's unexpected because Trey Murphy's asking price is too high? Michael Porter Jr. is expected to remain with the Nets, and then they'll revisit trade talks in the summer. So where do they really go from here? There's no one really out there. But two things have caught my eye with the Warriors. One was Draymond Green's comments last night, where he basically had an end of game press conference where he was thanking the Warriors for their 13 and a half years. He was saying it was a great run. It almost seemed as if he knew he was going to be on the way out. And I thought that was really intriguing. Maybe it's just him getting word of being included in these trade talks and it hit home for him, which obviously it would, just like it did with Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry when that group was split up there. And so Draymond Green, is the writing on the wall? Is he going to be moved before the deadline? I would not anticipate him being traded unless it's for Giannis, unless Mike Dunleavy and the Warriors pull off some other shocking move. But certainly caught my eye last night, his comments there. And then the other thing, too, it's just a minor thing, is Pat Spencer only has one more game left on his two-way contract. So they have to open up a roster space if they want to sign Pat Spencer. We'll see what happens with the Warriors. I haven't heard any movement on that front other than that Giannis has been their number one trade target. And at this point, it seems like that their number one trade target is going to be held on to the Milwaukee Bucks entering the summer, which could very well mean that the Warriors hold on to everything, including Jonathan Kuminga, for the rest of the season.
I will say, very interesting to see Draymond's comments yesterday. I think it almost felt like he got emotional given everything. 13 and a half years is a great one. He said it was a great run a couple times, and it felt like, oh wow, maybe this is the end. But I just don't know. Do teams really view Draymond Green as a positive asset nowadays in today's NBA at 34, 35, however old he is?
Well, I believe it was ESPN reported today of the Lakers' interests. We can confirm that the Lakers would be interested in acquiring Draymond Green if the Warriors were to get Giannis and they need another team there. There is another team. I'm not going to mention them simply because we're not going to put that out there and it's not going to happen either. But there is another team that I've heard would be interested in Draymond Green and they dwell near the top of the Western Conference standings. So there is minimal interest out there in a player like Green. You know what you're getting. You're getting an elite defender come playoff time, a guy that's won 4 championships with the Warriors and could be a really good veteran presence for your locker room. And that's why there is a little bit of interest out there. But again, Tomer, it all depends on this Giannis trade talks. And right now, it does not seem like that the Warriors will be getting Giannis Antetokounmpo in the next 23 hours.
Surely a disappointing trade deadline for them then if they're not able to get Giannis. I feel like they really had just been putting all their eggs in this basket here where it was Giannis or bust. So I mean I guess if they are standing pat or not making that move, is Kaminga bought into this team? Is this really a situation where you're going to bring the guy that you benched this from December to January, and you're just going to bring him back for a playoff run after you just didn't play him, and there seems to be a lack of trust and maybe even some toxicity in some levels?
They're going to have to. If they can't trade for Giannis and there's nothing else out there, they're not just going to dump Jonathan Kuminga for whatever they can get. We've talked about that ever since the summer. We've done reporting on this exclusively on Clutch Points about how the Warriors view his contract as a very valuable asset. And that's going to continue to be true heading into the offseason, where teams could potentially trade for him in the summer and give him a full year before he hits unrestricted free agency. So that's kind of where we're at with the Kuminga stuff. If he's not traded for Giannis, he'll be back on the Warriors roster. He'll be returning from his knee injury fairly soon. And then the Warriors will go from there and see if they can make this work. But yeah, it's been a toxic situation since the summer, Tomer. There's no lying there. Him and Steve Kerr do not see eye to eye. Kaminga's agent has wanted him out of Golden State for quite some time. So I just don't really know how you fix the vibes in that locker room after the trade deadline, especially with this talk of Draymond being traded. And now that's been in his mind. The Warriors just had one of their worst performances of the season last night against the 76ers. Granted, they didn't have Stephen Curry, but again, it's one of those things where how do you recover from this with all these players that you were rumored to be trading in trade talks for Giannis, and now you bring them all back? It's just a very awkward situation that the Warriors will have to deal with for the rest of the year.
I I I I can't imagine being like, sure, that locker room, I'm sure those guys were all close, but just it's got to be just a weird situation no matter how you try to spin it. After, you know, Steve Kerr named Kuminga as a starter, I believe in game 3, said they liked what they were seeing, and then by, mid-November, I believe he was out of the rotation, or mid to it was December when he was out of the rotation, didn't play in I think 18 or 19 straight games, and then Butler goes down and then he's back in, but then he gets injured. It's just such a strange situation. But that does bring us to our last topic, and we'll get to some questions, Brett, if you feel like we have some time to. But our last segment today, which is what's going on with some of the other guys around the league, like John Morant, like Domantas Sabonis. When we originally made this, we did not have any jaw update, but we have since had some jaw updates. And if you guys missed it earlier in the show, we can report with confidence that the Sacramento Kings have inquired about trading for Grizzly star John Morant. Brett reported that earlier this morning, and we can also confirm that Ja has no interest in going to the Sacramento Kings. I think the Kings are also a little bit reluctant to give him the full 3-year, $178 million extension that he is seeking, and Morant just has no interest in going to the Sacramento Kings. Morant and his camp, however, are eyeing, and I think his preferred destinations here are the Miami Heat and to a bit of a lesser extent the Minnesota Timberwolves. But the Miami Heat are a team that he's eyeing and he really wants to go to. As we reported earlier, Pat Riley and the Heat have done their homework on Morant, and they feel confident in going out there and not only acquiring him, but paying him that extension. They feel like they can get him in their system and are confident in their ability to just get him focused on basketball. And so that's where John Morant kind of lies right now. Brett, I'll leave Sabonis to you. What is going on with the Kings and Sabonis? We know that the Toronto Raptors have been inquiring about him and they've wanted him. Where are the Raptors and where are the Kings with Sabonis right now?
Well, the Kings have been very receptive to those trade calls over the last several weeks for Domantas Sabonis with the Toronto Raptors. They've pinpointed R.J. Barrett as being the player that they want, and it makes a lot of sense given that Scott Perry is the guy who drafted him in New York. They continue to have a great relationship with one another. Just recently, when Toronto visited Sacramento, those two embraced pregame and they were talking at length with one another, smiling and laughing. And it seemed like at the time that there was something brewing there, that talks were kind of progressing at that point. But there's always been this stalemate, not only of draft pick compensation, but also Jakob Poeltl's contract, because the Sacramento Kings do not want Jakob Poeltl, who's under contract through the 29-30 season after just signing that big extension with the Raptors this past summer. And now they've been looking for a third team to help facilitate that deal. We talked about yesterday how the Memphis Grizzlies could potentially get involved there after trading Jaren Jackson and being open to taking on draft picks. We can report now that that is not an option for the Grizzlies. They do not want to take back any long-term salary, and they are committed to finding a trade for John Morant at this juncture. Obviously, the Sacramento Kings still have interest. John Morant and his camp do not want to go there. The Miami Heat have turned their focus to John Morant if they can get him for a Trae Young-like package, if they can dump Terry Rozier's contract and Simone Fontecchio, who's in the final year of his deal. That's kind of the package that they're looking at this point. Maybe some second-round picks, to be honest, but I don't see the Heat giving up a first-round pick for John Morant, especially with his value being that low. But as far as Sabonis goes, those talks have been put on hold, especially after this trade where the Raptors just acquired Chris Paul. They got rid of Ochai Agbaji, who was one of those pieces that would have been involved in the Kings trade for Domantas Sabonis. And it seems like that the Raptors are just going to dip below the luxury tax, maybe look for a center that's on a minimum like deal. Maybe they bring back Chris Boucher from the Boston Celtics, who's been rumored to be in some deals as well. But that's about it for the Raptors. It seems like that those Sabonis talks will be revisited in the offseason.
I do want to add that obviously the Grizzlies are not, obligated to take any deal that would send Morant to his preferred destination. And to my knowledge, Morant and his camp are kind of left in the dark right now as far as where he may be traded. It's not like I think it's safe to say the Harden Clippers trade with the Cavs was a collaborative effort. I think Giannis. If he's traded from the Bucks, that will be a collaborative effort to make sure he goes to his preferred destination. This situation with John Morant is not like that. I think the Grizzlies are going to go out and get the best available trade package. If that's a first round pick, they'll get that. If it's a young talent, they'll get that. But by no means are they uh, trying to get Morant to his preferred destination over the best package. It's not a situation like that. They are trying to get the best package for their star guard. Brett, who else we have to talk about? I mean, Anthony Davis's trade is surprisingly. Let's bring up Daniel Gafford. He was a guy who I think has been linked to a couple players. The Mavs, I know where we were getting indications, and obviously it's very fluid, but that the Mavs maybe were standing pat at the deadline. They shockingly traded Anthony Davis. What does that mean, you think, for Daniel Gafford?
Well, I don't see him being on the Raptors' radar at this point. That they would have to get rid of some big salaries. I don't think that R.J. Barrett is a player that the Mavericks would want to take on. And also, now you run into more problems where R.J. Barrett's more money than Daniel Gafford. The Mavericks don't want to take on any long-term money at this point. They've signaled that in the Anthony Davis trade. And so where does Daniel Gafford go? I'm just going to bring back up what we talked about earlier with the Atlanta Hawks. So that's a very real possibility because they were in on Anthony Davis. They wanted to buy him cheap for Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Kennard, maybe a protected first-round pick there. Obviously, Anthony Davis traded to the Washington Wizards. So now do they maybe pivot and they go after Daniel Gafford because they have been looking for more front court help behind Onyeka Okongwu? And obviously, we've seen from the Hawks what the vision is there. They want to have cap flexibility, they want to have young, dynamic players. And Daniel Gafford over the years has emerged as a very athletic rim running big man that would fit in really well with a 3-and-D type guy like Onyeka Okongwu in that front court. So keep an eye on the Hawks at this point. Other than that, the Indiana Pacers have continued to show interest in Daniel Gafford. We've heard that Benedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker have both been on the trade block as of late. So if Gafford is to be on the move, it would most likely be one of those two teams, whether it's the Pacers or the Hawks.
Man, we've talked about so many different guys. Is there? I mean, you mentioned it earlier in the bull segment, but I am curious. Do you have any indication who they feel like is their most like expendable guard right now between a Colin Sexton, a Anthony Simons, Io DeSumo? Who do they feel like maybe gets them the best value, or who are they most interested in keeping? Do you have any insight on that at all?
We don't know yet. It seems like that they just want to have a lot of cap space entering the offseason, and then maybe they'll look to re-sign some of these guys on team-friendly deals. Maybe they'll look to keep Simons on a deal around the mid-level exception. Maybe they'll look to keep Colin Sexton on some sort of deal. So until the offseason hits for the Bulls, because look to them, they got so many expiring guys now that other than Josh Giddey and Matas Buzelis and Noah Senge, other than those guys, they don't really have anybody under contract long term. So they're going to enter the offseason seeing what stars are potentially available, seeing if there's any buy low opportunities, and then they'll address some of these guys on expiring deals. But I'm sure that they're going to be active right up until the trade deadline, seeing if there's any sort of value that presents themselves for some of these guys that they may not see as long term fits, whether that's Sexton, Anthony Simons. I know they still have Zach Collins as well in that expiring contract. So maybe there's some value that they can find on the open market. And like we mentioned, Yves Missi still a potential trade target for the Bulls.
Brett, the chat wants you to talk about the Knicks, so talk about the Knicks, my buddy. What you got for me?
Gershon Yabusele is the only trade that we've been hearing that they've been trying to find a team to take on that contract. There has been nothing to this point. I checked in again this morning to see if there was anything going on with the Knicks. They still want Jose Alvarado. That is a very real possibility before this trade deadline, but the Pelicans do not want to take on Yabusele's contract. And so you're going to have to find another team there that would be willing to take that on. I believe it's like 5.1, $5.2 million player option for next season. Whether or not he actually stays in the NBA, there's been talk of some foreign teams potentially targeting him. So we'll see what happens there with the Knicks. But right now, it doesn't seem like that there's any traction on a deal. That could certainly change over the course of the next 20 hours or so, because that is the one player that we've been reporting on Clutch Points that they've been looking to trade. They've been looking to flip Yabusele for some kind of secondary talent, whether that's Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, Jeremy Sohan of the San Antonio Spurs was another name that we reported. But right now, it seems like Alvarado is their top target.
There was a question about the Clippers that I feel like we can discuss briefly. Can they get Anthony Simons or Colin Sexton? I mean, look, their priorities, as we've mentioned, have been to get further under the first apron and possibly out of the tax, and in order to sign Jordan Miller and Kobe Sanders. I'm not sure in the game's limit because they were able to sign Patrick Baldwin Jr. to a 10-day, which gets them, which they then avoided the under 15 rule. So they do have some games left on those two guys, but those are guys they want to lock up. They have young talent there finally that is playing, that has been good, and they want to keep developing. And so, I think when you look at this roster, it's kind of interesting what they've done here. They got a 26-year-old Darius Garland. They have a 28-year-old John Collins, a 28-year-old Ivica Zubats. Jordan Miller, I believe, just turned 25 or 26. Kobe Sanders is 23. So all of a sudden, your kind of young core here just got a little bit younger in age with moving off of James Harden, acquiring John Collins, acquiring Darius Garland. So they were able to get younger there. So, Sexton could fit the bill as kind of like a, rest of the season ball handler. Maybe there's some interest in going beyond that, but as we've said, the Clippers do not want to go past 2027 as far as having contracts and salaries on their books. They are, it remains to be seen who's available, but they want to be willing and ready to trade for the next disgruntled star, or if a player wants to, decline an option and go to them like James Harden did a couple of years ago, they want to be ready for that. They have the contracts to do it. They just want the cap space as well to make multiple moves like they did in 2019, acquiring Kawhi Leonard and trading for Paul George. Um, what else do we have? Any Suns news? Brett, you got anything on the Suns?
Nothing on the Suns. They want to try to move Nick Richards to get below the tax line. That's about it. They don't want to shake up this roster too much. There were some teams kind of inquiring earlier in the year in December, late November about Jalen Green, but the Suns want to keep him, and they obviously want to pair him with Devin Booker. And the Suns have exceeded expectations this season. Jordan Knott is certainly going to be in discussion for Coach of the Year. This is a team that's going to continue to push forward. They're one of the most physical in the league when it comes to defensive intensity. Dylan Brooks setting the standard there, looking like an all-star in his own right, having a great season. And so the Suns roster, it is what it is. They like what they have, and they're going to be looking to trade Nick Richards heading into the 3 p.m. trade deadline on Thursday. But that's pretty much it, Tomer. Other than the Ja Morant watch, that seems like that's the next star that could potentially be dealt and potentially the last star before this trade deadline. The Miami Heat are certainly involved in those discussions. They are trying to get Ja Morant on a very low, buy low price without giving up any significant draft picks. So that's about it. Keep being on the lookout for some news tonight about Ja Morant.
Last thing I wanted to discuss before we head out, Brett, if you have a minute. Uh, the Atlanta Hawks. I think we heard a lot about Zachary Ricochet, Kristaps Porzingis. Do you think the Mavs maybe pivoting towards the Wizards deal maybe was in part because maybe the Hawks weren't willing to give up Ricochet because they wanted to keep their core together? Do you think any of that is related at all?
100% because the Hawks, they didn't even want to give up an outright first round pick for Anthony Davis. They wanted to give up those expiring salaries ever since he had that hand injury. It was only Porzingis and Luke Kennard and then a heavily protected first round pick that they'd be willing to give up. So they weren't willing to give up Zachary Ricochet. That was something that we had reported on, other places I reported on, that was just something that was non-negotiable at this trade deadline. They want to continue to develop him and see what he can give them for the future. And so the Wizards, they came in with their draft pick centered trade, expiring salaries. Obviously, Chris Middleton, I believe it's like $33 million that will come off the books just from him for the Dallas Mavericks. Could be a buyout candidate as well. And so that's why the Mavericks made the deal. It gives them cap flexibility, gives them draft picks that they couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And so that's where we're at now. Anthony Davis heading to the Wizards, to a team that is very young and continuing to rebuild and has a very bright future ahead.
That is it for today's show. I feel like we've talked about pretty much everyone so far. Covered a lot of avenues. Trade deadline tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. We will be back with another show tomorrow. I think we're looking at about 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Stay tuned on that. We'll post updates on our Twitter to confirm exactly when we're going live. But expect another show tomorrow. A post trade deadline show. Where Brett and I will go in, break down everything that happened, and maybe provide some intel as to why teams made certain moves. That is it for everything. I mean, Brett Siegel right here, Tomer Azarly. We will catch you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you guys joining. Appreciate all the questions, and we'll see you then. Happy trade deadline day, guys.